Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be getting into the second half of a script that I've been putting together on how to query local group membership from a remote computer. So this will be part two. If you're looking for the original part one, that's already up on my channel. It's the last video that I just posted up there. Okay, so basically the concept here is we've put together a script that is able to reach out to a remote computer and display the results of the membership of the local groups. So like who's a member of the administrators group, who's in power users, who's in remote desktop users, stuff like that. The concept here is we want to be able to use this as like an auditing tool to see what is currently configured in the group memberships on a PC, because this could potentially be security use, if you will, to find out, what should be there and what should not. So in part one of the script, we had put together the basic guts of it. Let me bring that up on the screen right now. So we had put together the basic guts of it using PowerShell remoting to go get group information, taking each group, finding the membership of it, and then from that result, creating an object for each user who's a member of each local group. Right? So that's putting that object together. And then basically this new object here, command or commandlet, is just sending that out to the pipeline, closing the PowerShell session, and away we go. So now what we want to do, oh, and if you wanted to see what the output looked like, run the script, provide a computer name, and you get an object for each user who's a member of each local group. So in this case, like for instance, if administrators has two members of it, you get two objects out in the pipeline, right? Users looks like has three members of it, so we could see where those are coming from, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some functionality into this. So number one, the ability to take the results here and maybe save it to a file. So kind of my envisioning here is we can make a template to save the output and then take that template and maybe compare it against the local group membership of another computer. Okay, so think of like a template as maybe your compliance piece that you want as your known good configuration, and then compare it against the local group memberships of another computer to see maybe how they differ. Right? So we want the ability to create a template, and then maybe the ability to compare the template that we have created previously to another computer. Okay, so basically what I'm envisioning here is my script will have three forms of output. Okay, we're going to have one that makes a template, one that just displays the results to the screen like you see here, and then a final one that does a compare against a template versus another computer. Right? So to kind of put those together, I'm going to need some parameters to play around with here, more than we already have. So kind of the first parameter I kind of envision myself having here would be a parameter for a template file. Right? So that would be coming in, we're going to put that in as a string object, and I'll just call it template file just to call it something. Right? And then another parameter we're going to need, this one, we're going to make, again, a string parameter, or it's going to be a string object, I guess I should say. And this would be, you could call it whatever you like. I'm just going to call it mode, okay, as in what way do I want the script to run, right? So for mode, and then I'm going to default it. I'm going to have a couple values. So kind of like what I usually do when I'm teaching this in a class. I usually have screen output, make template, and compare are the three types or the three modes that I normally use. And we're going to have a default here of screen output. So if the mode parameter is not called, that's what it's going to default to. And because I have those exact three values, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a validate set out of this and just allow those three values to be supplied here. So in the validate set, we're going to allow screen output. We're going to allow make template, and we're going to allow compare. Right? So those are the three strings that would be accepted on this parameter. And again, we're defaulting it to screen output. So if this parameter, if mode is not called, this is what its default value is going to be. All right. So that gets me set up in the parameter block to now add some functionality into here. All right. Now, the first thing here we're going to tackle is the making of a template, right? So the screen output and the making of a template. Now, basically, the way that this works right now is I have a single object outputting to the pipeline, okay, for each user who's a member of each group. So basically, like this output here could be, I don't know, 10 objects, 15 objects, however many members are there. So even though it looks like just one big group of output, it is in fact different iterations of the for each loop running that are producing a single object at a time. Now it happens so fast we don't really see it that way, but it is in fact like, this ran, then, the loop cycled again, this ran, and so on. So what you're seeing here is the repetitions of like this loop running for each user who's in each group, and then this loop running right here for each group that we're analyzing. So this is in fact, sending one object at a time to the pipeline. Now, if I want to save this as a template to maybe import later, I can't really let it do that. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to capture all of the information and then decide, all of the objects, I guess I should say, and then decide if I want to send it to the screen to make the screen output or if I want to save it to a file. Okay, now in order to do that, I need to capture all of the objects into an array. So the first thing here is we are going to save a single object into a variable, and I'll just call it $OBJ. Okay, so that'll be a single object, and then for each one, I'm going to capture it into an array. Okay, now I'm going to need an array for each computer. Okay, so if you look at this output, this is one computer's worth of output. So what I want is I want an array defined for each computer. So that would be up in this for each right here. Okay, so even before I make the session, I can go define my array. So I'll just call it $OBJ array, and I'll equal it to an empty array. So that's basically how you do it. You do an @ and then an open and close parenthesis. So that defines a variable as an array with just nothing in it to begin with. Now you might be asking, well, why are you doing that? Well, if you just put a single object into a variable, that variable becomes the type of object that is. So in this case, it would become a PS object object. Now, if you go to add something else into it, it's not going to work because this variable thinks it should only have one object in it. So basically, like the amount of objects you could put in a variable get defined when the variable is first created like this. Okay, so I don't want to make the variable and put one object in it at the same time because it kind of gets locked into that. Like that variable can now only have one object. So if you want a variable to have multiple objects in it, and you want to add each object one at a time, okay, like because I don't have all of the objects available to add into this variable up front. So what I have to do is I have to cast it before I put anything in it as an empty array, and then down here, what I'll do is I will use the plus equal, and then I'll put each object into it one at a time. All right. So basically, once we've processed through every group and every user in each group, this will now have all of the output in it. Right? So now what I need to do is I need to figure out what to do with the data, the objects that are in here. All right. So now, after I close the session, so again, I'm doing this for each computer. Okay. I'm going to, so now if I do at this level here, this is in this level right here, line 30, I'm removing the session because remember, we made a session for each computer. We're closing that session out. So now what I want to do is now we're going to work with whatever output we want to put together. And the easiest way to do this is to use the switch construct. So I'm going to look at whatever is in dollar mode and make some decisions on what I want to do with that. Okay, so if the mode is set to screen output, what we're going to do is we're going to do a write output $obj array, right? Like so. All right, so at a minimum here, that could make your screen output, and then that would kind of finish everything off. Okay, so in fact, if you want to see, I can kind of test that out here without using anything, and the script should work exactly the same. Okay, because I had this mode set to screen output, and so when it comes down here with mode, that's set to screen output. So it means that this script block is going to run, which is just sending my array out to the pipeline. Okay, that's what write output does. So now I can go add another option here. So what if switch was set to make template? Right? What do I want to do? Again, that one could be a pretty easy thing to do, obj array. So we could take that variable, make sure I spelled it correctly, and we could, I'm going to do export CLI XML because ultimately I want to be able to re-import this back in. So CLI XML format is probably the best way to do that. If you want to take objects in the pipeline, save it out to a file, to then be able to re-import that file later on and get kind of the same objects back, CLI XML is the best format to use for that. Okay, so path, where do I want to save this? So I am going to use a PowerShell variable that exists in scripts called $pwd. That basically stands for PowerShell Working Directory. And that variable is basically wherever the prompt was when you called the script. So in this case, I'm gonna save the template to the same directory as where the script is. Right? Now again, there's lots of other options you can do with this, but just for simplicity's sake, that's probably the easiest. So $pwd, that would represent the current directory where the PowerShell prompt is at when the script was called, and then I'll use my template file variable here. All right. Oh, yep, template file. There we go. All right. So, and oh, forgot the dollar sign in front of that. So $template file. Okay. So there we go. So that should now save a file if I want it to do that. Right. So let's go ahead, save that, and let's make sure it works by default. And oh, see, we got something wrong here. All right. So it's always fun to test. And oh, I see what I did. I didn't close the script block there. So again, for make template, this has to be a complete script block. So I didn't have the closing there. So let me save that and try it again. Make sure it works regularly. Yes, it does. And then if you look at my directory on C:\demo, you can see I just have the script there thus far. So let's run this again, except this time we'll say mode. Mode will do make template and template file. Let's just call it temp1.xml. All right, so I save that off, and if I go look in the directory now, hey, I've got an XML file which should have some data in it. So if I do get content temp, okay, we could see there's some XML information in here. Okay, so cool. So that gets that going. So that's now the second form of output. All right. Now the third form of output, the compare, that's going to be a little bit fun, right? Because we need to grab some information here. So if I want to do a compare, that's gonna be a more involved script block in all honesty. So I'm just gonna make that carry over to a line here. All right. So let's talk about what we're gonna do with that. Okay. So first things first. What are we gonna do to compare? And basically what we're going to do is we're going to use a commandlet called compare object. Okay, and let's kind of see what that's going to look like here. Okay, so I can kind of run this on my own here. So let's maybe say $ref. Maybe that'll be the template. So let me do import CLI XML. Oops, I can spell here. Import CLI XML. Let's do, what did I call this? Temp. There we go. So we're going to bring that in and store it in that variable. So if you look at $ref, okay, that's what it's got. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to client one for a moment here. Let me change over to that VM. And I'm going to bring up computer management, and I'm going to go adjust the local groups here. All right, so let's go ahead. Actually, no, before I do that, let's go back and let's just run the script and save that into another variable. So ref was the template there. Maybe $out, that'll be my current output where we'll just run the script. All right, so let's do groups, computer, client one. Okay, save that output in there. So $out. All right, so now I've got those two things in there. And what I could do is I can run the commandlet compare object. All right. So in fact, let me type that out here. So let's do compare object. And with compare object, we're going to have a reference object. So that would be $ref. We're going to have a difference object. So that would be like, let's say my current output, the current computer I'm looking at. And then what properties do I actually want to pay attention to? So this here, we had properties in our object of group name and username, right? So those are the things I want it to pay attention to. All right, so properties, so we had group name and username. All right, now if I run this, you see that there's like nothing there, right? Because there's no differences. Okay, so if there's nothing there, you're going to get no output. Okay, that's what compare object does. So now let's go and let's kind of make some changes here. So maybe let's take, let's see, replicator. Let's take this user out of replicator. All right, so that would be something that's in the template that's not in the current computer. And then maybe we'll go add someone to remote desktop here. Let's go add someone else to remote desktop. So let's maybe add user one here. All right. So now that's something that's in the computer that's not in the template. So that would be the two different kind of forms here. Okay. So now I want to rerun my $out to get a new scan of what's happening on that computer. and then we're going to do the compare object again. And notice how I get some data out here. Okay, so I get group name, I get username, and then I get this side indicator. And basically, what it's showing here is the direction of the arrows will tell you when something is different and on what side it's different in. Right? So in this case, like when I removed the user out of Replicator, this user2 is in the template, but it's not in the local computer, right? So if I look at $ref, you could see that. Okay, so in this case, user2 is in the replicator group according to the template. Okay, so that's the data that's in the template. And remember, I made that change. I removed user2 out of replicator group. Okay, so this indicator means that there's a group membership in the template that doesn't exist in the computer. Okay, and then this one over here, notice the sidecar or the side indicators going the other way. And what that's saying is the difference object has something in it that's not in the reference object. So in that case, like if you look at the reference object, find remote desktop users, and it just has a single user, Jay Kent, in there. Okay, so this is saying, hey, well, in the current computer, there's an extra user in there that's not in the template. Okay, so you have that going there. So what I can do with this is I can kind of, again, make my own object here. But I don't necessarily want to rely on this because they're kind of vague, right? You know, the pointing of the arrow, you would have to know the script commands that were being run inside for which one's the reference object and which one's the difference object, right? So I want to kind of, you know, basically fix this a bit, make another object as output that kind of simplifies that a bit, if you will, right? So that's kind of what we want to do, right? So in order to achieve that, we're going to need to do obviously a bit of coding here to kind of make that happen, right? So the first thing we're going to do inside of compare is if we're doing a compare, we're going to need to load a template that already exists. Okay, so let's call that $template, just to maybe give it a variable name here. And $template will do import CLI XML, and the path we're going to go grab from $pwd, which again would be the directory where we're calling the script from, and we'll grab, we'll just use template file. Okay, so template file, that variable or that parameter up here, this could be used two different ways: to make a template and then to load a template from a file. Okay, so I'm kind of using this variable two different ways. So if you're doing make template, this will make a file by that name, and if you're doing compare, it will load a template by whatever file name you give it. Okay, so that would be the first part there. And then we need to do our compare object. Right? So we can run compare object, and the reference object would be the template, right? And the difference object would be your $obj array. Okay, so that again was the scan that was done against you know, a live computer. And then we got to tell it the properties we want. That's going to scroll over the line here, so let me just go ahead and do a back tick to carry that down to the next line. Property, group name, and username. Right? Because again, those are the two properties we wanted to pay attention to. Right? So that could be that. And let's go ahead and save this. And let's just go make sure we got at least that part correct. So let's go run the script. So we're not going to do the mode here. We're going to do compare. And it's one of the nice things about when you do validate sets, like I did in the parameter block up here, validate set, when you have the options, you can actually tab complete them. Like if I do mode, check this out. Tab, 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 right? So you could tab complete to the values in a validate set. And then the template file, temp1.xml. All right, and we should see that, again, there were our differences. All right, so we got that going on. All right, and if I do nothing here, I should just still see the regular output of the computer that I was scanning. All right, so that still works as well. All right, so now we want to fancy this up a little bit here. All right, so that the output is a little more indicative of what's happening, a little more obvious. So basically what I want to do is I want to keep group name and username. I'm fine with that. But what I want is I want to replace the side indicator object with like my own. So that basically means I need to put together my own object, if you will. All right. So so what we could do with this is we could again, kind of mess with the output, right? So instead of releasing this output to the pipeline, I'm going to save it in a dollar results variable, right? So that way we're not releasing it to the pipeline. We can actually do something with it. Okay, so now the something that I'm going to do with it, I actually need to do this two different ways. And again, I apologize for the complexity here, but you got to think everything out. So the first one is, remember when I did compare and everything was the same, you got no output. So in my script here, I don't want that, right? Because if somebody runs the script and it just produces no output, they're going to think your script is broken, right? So you want to make something there. So the easiest way to do this is to do like an if else. So you have an if with one condition, like if there was output or not, and then you have an else for the other condition. All right. So we'll do an if here, and we'll say if dollar results equal null. Okay, so I'm going to use the special variable null to mean, hey, if that variable's empty, what do I want to have happen? Okay, and then we'll have an else, which will be what would work if there was actually objects in there. Okay, so let's do the first one if there's no changes here. All right, so what we could do with that, again, we're building objects here. So I'm going to make an object with a property table, okay, like we've done before. So let's go make the property table. So let's call it props2 this time, because I think I already have a props up here. Yeah, so there's a props there. So let's do a props2. We'll go make a property table. And again, I'll start it right off as an ordered hash table, just to make sure everything comes back in the way I like. Or I spelled ordered right. That doesn't look right. Anyway, I think it is. All right, and then we'll have an inside. And then the first thing, again, just like up here, we're going to have a computer name. We're going to have, if results is null, that means there was no difference. So I'm maybe going to have a computer name, username, and maybe difference result, right? Something like that. Right, so it shouldn't be too fancy here. So let's do computer name. So you might be thinking, why are you putting computer name? Well, remember, uh, when you look at how I set this up, I have this set to be able to scan multiple computers, right? So that's kind of also why I'm making an object for output here. So the current computer that's in this part of the loop would be $PC. Let's see. Let's do, we want username property. We'll maybe set that out to null. So that way I have a property there, but it just has nothing in it. A group name, again, I'll also set that to null. And then lastly, I need a property that specifies, that signifies this, right? I don't want to use side indicator because that's not really an obvious thing for someone who might not be familiar with compare object. So I need to make another property. So how about I just make one called difference result? How about that? Okay, and again, you know, like I'm just making these up. You guys can certainly make up whatever you like. So difference result, and I'll set it to no difference, right? So then we will take that hash table, which I apologize, I didn't close there. There we go. So we'll take that hash table, and then we will, let's do $obj2, new object, type name, PS object, and property props2. All right. So, and then I'm grabbing it in a variable, which is just, again, a habit I get into. I could then write output $obj2. All right. So kind of, you know, it's like an extra piece here, but in some people who do scripting here, there might be stuff you want to do to the object. So I grab the object in a variable, then I could maybe do something to it. Typically, one of the things you might want to do is specify the type of object, so you can kind of put your own types on them. And that would happen after it's created, but before you send it out to the pipeline. So usually, like you'll see a lot of PowerShell scripters do this. Even though they might be sending it right out to the pipeline, they'll put it in a variable, then send that out to the pipeline, because maybe later on down the road, I might want to add some more code between 45 and 46 here, lines 45 and 46. Okay, so that gets that part done. And then we're going to need, so that again would be if there was no results. So you're basically creating an object that has the computer name and a property called difference result that has a value of no difference. And username is null, group name is null, because again, there's no difference. So now on the else side, we are going to have to process each result that comes back. Because remember, this might have multiple results in it, right? Because if you look here, there was two differences. That's two different objects. So I need to work through each one of those. So that would be a for each, right? So I'm going to do a for each. Let's say $result in $results plural. And then we'll kind of walk through what we're going to do here. Okay. So, so basically, I need to set whatever the condition is, right? So here, like I had difference result and I had no difference. So I need to set the different ones here. Like if side indicator is the arrow pointing this way, I'm going to put a value in that difference result property. And then if it's this way, I'm going to put a different value in there. All right. So that's what we need to look at. We need to look at $result dot side indicator. And if it's this, we're going to do something. And if it's that, we're going to do something else. Okay. So let's put that logic in here. So let's say if $result dot side indicator equals and then what was it? Equal sign and then greater than sign. That would be, so equal sign and greater sign. So that would be when something is in the computer but not in the template. And then if it's going this way, something's in the template that's not in the computer. All right. So again, finding differences. Is the difference in the computer or is the difference in the template? All right. So I need to figure out some properties for that. And again, what you guys might do might be different than what I would do. This is just something that works. So let's do dollar. I'm just going to make a variable called dollar condition, and I'm going to put in it some string that'll be the value ultimately for this property that we're making. Right? Um, so let's see, what should it be? How about exists in PC only? All right. So let's do that. And then we'll have an else. Right, exists in template only. Okay. So basically, if the side indicator is that, we're going to set a variable to have this value in it. And if it's something else, which again, there's only one other way this could exist, it would be the other way. We're going to set it to exist in template only. All right. So now we're going to put our property table together. So I'm just going to steal this whole property table up here, just so I don't have to type it out again. Let's see. So I do want this indent line. Right, let's tab that in, tab that in. Okay. So now we actually have stuff here. So $props2, because you might be thinking, well, why using the same variables? Remember, I'm inside of an overall if. Okay. Oh, I just saw a typo here as well, dollar result. Um, so remember, it's either this script block here is going to run or this script block here is going to run, but never both at the same time. So I can reuse the same variables in both. All right. So $PC username would be dollar result dot username, and group name would be dollar result dot group name, and the difference result would be whatever I had for dollar condition. All right. Then we're gonna make an object and then send that object out to the pipeline. All right, so let's see if this logic works. See if I have typos anywhere. All right, it's the fun side of just laying some code out. You might have a typo here or there. All right, so let's see. So first of all, does the script work in just screen mode? Yep, so it still does regular screen output. And then let's try it with comparing. And cool, there we go. So computer name, username, group name, and difference result. So this user in this group is in the PC only. This user in this group exists in the template only. All right? And if they're the same, this should produce no output. So let me make a template again. So let's do mode template and template file. Let's call this temp2.xml. Oh, I didn't put the wrong value in there. It's not template, it's make template. There we go. Okay, so now we've got a new template for what currently exists for client 1. And if I do the compare, There's the compare. Let's do temp2. And notice, cool. So now we've got output. We've got client one, username, group name have nothing in them and no difference. So you might be thinking, well, again, why am I doing that? Well, basically what I want here is if I scan a whole bunch of computers, right? This output would mesh with the rest of this output for differences. Okay, so that's kind of again why I'm choosing to make an object for output, even if there is nothing, no difference between. Okay, so that way, if you put a whole bunch of computers, you could have computers that match, and then the output for computers that don't match. Okay, so that could all mesh together into one pipeline output because basically you're outputting the same kind of object. Okay, it's a PS custom object with computer name, username, group name, and difference result. Computer name, username, group name, difference result. All right. So that basically gets everything set for what I want to do with the output. Now, one last change that I want to do here, or one last improvement to the script, is basically the script could still be messed up. And notice here, if I try to do a compare, notice that it will let me do it, right, without specifying a template file. Okay, so that's kind of a bad thing right there. And I could also use template file, right, and not specify a mode. Okay, notice it just defaults to screen output, so it's totally ignoring the template file, right? So what I need out of this is I need both of these parameters to be linked together. Okay, so that way if one is called, the other one has to be called as well. I can't just rely on the default value. Okay, so that's a change, or that's some components that we can kind of incorporate in here. Okay, so to do that, you need to make the parameters mandatory, and you need to make them each in their own parameter set. So that way they're kind of grouped together. But I don't want to like group all three because computer name can be used on its own. I don't want to lose that, right? Because notice if I just want screen output, right, I could just kind of run this without specifying the mode at all. And you see it works. So I don't want to lose that. So what I need to do is I need to group these two together. And the easiest way to do that is to make a parameter set out of them. Okay, so let me go kind of put in here a parameter attributor, and inside of it, we're going to add a few things in there. All right, so we're going to make an argument of mandatory. Okay, now some people you'll see online, they'll do mandatory equals true. You don't actually have to do that. By just putting the name of kind of the argument here, it's already set to true. So it's kind of like you're doing, twice the work. And then parameter set name equals, and then I need to give this some type of name. And again, you can literally make this up. I'll just call mine template, right? And then I'll put the same thing with the mode parameter. Okay, so I'm just going to add that in as well. Now, after you have a closing bracket, like for parameter here, notice how that has an opening bracket to a closing bracket right there. You can put a carriage return to then have the rest of the parameter. Like so, even though it's multiple lines, this is still seen as one parameter. Okay, so I have it mandatory and again in the same parameter set. Right? So now when I go ahead and I run this without any of the parameters, see how it still kind of wants to group. It still wants a value for template file, right? And if I gave it, something, temp1.xml, it also wants mode, right? So it's prompting for these mandatory parameters, and that's not at all what I want. Okay. So the other kind of trick here, and this you don't see documented too much out there, is you have to specify what parameter set to use when none is specified, right? So if I don't call template file, if I don't call mode, PowerShell doesn't know not to use this parameter set. Okay, so what you could do is in commandlet binding, you can also put an argument in here called default parameter set name, and then specify it to literally just a value that you make up. So I'll call mine, I don't know, AAA, just to put something there. Okay, how about I'll just call it fake? How about that? Okay, so you put something in there, right? And what that does is that allows computer name, which does not belong to any parameter set, to be called individually on its own without utilizing these other parameters. Because if you don't declare a parameter set for a parameter, it belongs to all parameter sets, right? So you'll see that, like if you look at help on other commandlets, like if I look at help on maybe like get service, notice the different parameter sets, right? And notice that computer name is in all three of them. So basically how you do that in the code is on the parameter, you don't specify a parameter set name that it belongs to. So by doing that, it belongs to all. And then by having a fake one here as the default, that allows this parameter that does not belong to, that belongs to all parameter sets to be called on its own, right? So that should finish this, right? So if I come in here, let me do Control C to cancel that. So if I run the script just calling computer name, that should be fine. Cool, right? So basically, it's taking mode at its default value, right? So that allows that to happen. I know when you look at a lot of like entry level PowerShell stuff, they will mention, you can make a parameter mandatory or give it a default value, but you can never do both. And that's actually not a true statement because you can see I'm doing both right here. The trick though is it has to be in its own parameter set that's not the default one. Right? So that's how you can make a parameter mandatory and have a default value on it. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. And then if we want to just do the compare again, um, that should work fine there. Cool. And if I do mode, if I'm calling mode, okay, so this is where now, you're using that parameter set because you're calling a parameter out of that set. And if I call one, it'll prompt for the other one. So see now it wants the template file, right? And it works. And if I go the opposite, let's do the template file without calling mode, see how it prompts me for mode. So in this case, what did I want to do? Mode, we wanted compare. And you can see that that works as well. All right. So basically that's the code then. That's my finished script. So again, I'll have a copy of this saved up in the download spot. I'll have a link for it in the description if you want to snag the code. And again, any questions, just throw a comment in the comment section. And likewise, as I always mentioned, if you enjoyed this, consider giving me a subscribe. Definitely appreciate it. I'm trying to get up to that magical 1,000 subscriber level at some point here. which then allows me to have a say in the advertising that you guys are forced to watch. So until you get to 1,000 subscribers, I have no control over what YouTube shows. Once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm then able to customize that. I can make choices on that. So so anyway, thanks for hanging with me. Give me a like and subscribe if you appreciated the content, and some comments if you have any questions or thoughts or what have you. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.